Hello and welcome back to Tekin Builds. My name is Ty Campbell, and in this show, you guessed it, we build things. We've built a Vanquish VS410 Limited, we've built a Vanquish VS410 Pro, and we've also built a TLR 8XE A-scale buggy. The next build we're going to jump straight into is our Pro-Line Pro-2 Street Eliminator car. Now, some of you are probably wondering what a Street Eliminator is. It's pretty simple. Basically, it is a short course chassis, so like a Traxxas Slash, an associated SC10, a TLR 22, or in this instance, a Pro-Line Pro-2. You start with one of those short course platforms, and then from there, it's entirely up to you on what you want to do. There are many bodies available from companies like Pro-Line and J-Concepts and Parma. There are wheels and tires available from companies like Pro-Line, J-Concepts, and DE Racing. And there are lots of suspension components that can be used for Street Eliminator chassis. So basically what we are doing is taking an off-road designed car, putting drag radials on the rear with some little radials on the front, putting on a Street Eliminator type body. So in this instance I have a Pro-Line Octane. There are other bodies available. This is the one I chose to go with. You put all of that together, put it on the short course chassis with the proper body mounts, and you've got yourself the start of a Street Eliminator chassis. Power is pretty much wide open. The rules are basically 2-cell and run what you brung for a motor. So really this whole class is about being able to put the power down consistently and go in a straight line, and it's a 132-foot drag strip. So your goal, get the car to the opposite end of the track as fast as possible without blowing the tires off or crashing the thing. I'm really excited about this build. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. There's a couple things we have to do to this Pro-Line Pro-2 SCB chassis to get it ready for this kind of project. So let's dive right into it. Teardown for a special project is always fun. We're going to start by taking the SCB tires and wheels off because we don't need them for a street drag car. The wheels and tires off, we can move on to other unnecessary parts like the front body mount. So I just unscrew that and then put the screws back into the servo mounts. Next to go are the shocks. We're not going to use these ones. We've got Pro-Line Pro-Specs that we're going to do some modification to lower the ride height of our vehicle. So the front and rear shocks on this buggy, while they are super nice, they gotta go. And when shocks are off, I like to put the hardware back just so I don't risk losing it. Now we can remove the rear cage mount for the original SCB cage body setup. This is where our extended body mounts are going to mount up. The bumper has to go, so I'm going to start pulling all the hardware, and we're going to take the whole front clip off of the car so that we can swap out our arms, swap our camber links and turnbuckles, and do all the modifications we need to bring this into Bandit width. So we're going to pull off the camber links from the shock tower and remove the bumper mount. Now I'm going to take the shock bolts up top off the shock tower because we are going to swap this for the truck shock tower. And we have to swap it so that our body posts will fit. So it's just 2 bolts holding the bulkhead, and the shock tower comes right off. So now I've got the whole front clip off of the car. We're going to start swapping some parts around. First part being the shock tower. This is the SCB shock tower, and it's not going to work with the Pro-Line extended body mount set. So in order to make that work, we have to put on the truck shock tower. This is the ProTrac truck shock tower for the Slash chassis or the Pro-2 chassis, and it's got the 2 mounts for the extended body posts on here. The next thing we're going to do after we swap the shock tower out is we're going to change to Bandit width arms. Now this truck has the Pro-Line ProTrac width arms, so everything's too wide for our body, and our tires actually end up rubbing on the inside. So we're going to narrow this whole thing up to buggy width all the way around. I got RPM front arms and I got RPM rear arms along with some MIP X-Duty shafts in order to suck the whole thing into Traxxas Bandit width, along with swapping out all the turnbuckles. Now we can put the ProTrac shock tower on. So we just replace the 2 screws into the bulkhead, and then the extended body mount bracket can screw onto the back of the shock tower. Now I'm going to start taking the front end apart so that we can replace the arms. Now these are, again, they're too wide for our setup because they're ProTrac width, so we're actually going to swap the whole truck over to RPM Bandit width arms.
This is really easy to do. It's just a couple hinge pins and you can swap the arm out. Now the outer hinge pin for the hub is actually smaller on the Pro-Line vehicle than it is on the Slash. So rather than getting new hubs, I just decided to drill the Pro-Line hubs out for a larger hinge pin that would fit in the RPM arm. With those drilled out, we can place them back into the arms, and we'll install the Bandit length camber links. Now that our arms are swapped and our camber links are swapped, we can put the front clip back on the chassis and start replacing the hardware. The steering links are too long as well, so we're also going to swap those out for Bandit length steering links. Now the body post can go in the new extended body post mount. These are really cool, should hold the body nice and secure. I love how they have these grub screws with a O-ring for the thumb washer to screw onto, so we don't have pins or anything like that. I set the height to approximately where I think it's gonna have to be. We might have to lower it one hole just to get our right height down where we want it. I put the upper shock screws back through the shock tower and replace the shock pivot balls and the M3 lock nuts, again, so I don't lose the stuff.
The front end's all swapped now. We got the ProTrac truck shock tower on, we got the extended body mounts on, and these are really cool. I love these Pro-Line thumb washers. They keep the body on nice and tight. We don't have any pins. We've got RPM front arms on here now, so this thing is now Traxxas Bandit track width, so everything will fit under our body nicely. And we have the Bandit turnbuckles because the arms were narrower than the ProTrac arms. Now that we're done with the front end, we can focus our attention on the rear, and we'll get the rear extended body mounts put on the shock tower. We'll swap the arms out for the RPM Bandit arms, and then we'll build our MIP X-Duty shafts and change out that rear turnbuckle.
First thing we have to do on the back end of our buggy is remove this motor guard because we're not going to use it. We're actually going to put a custom wheelie bar setup that we 3D printed on the back of the car. I just have to drop the motor so I can get that out of the way and reach the inner camber link screws on the shock tower. With access to those, I can pull that hardware out and let those camber links go. Next thing to do is unscrew the hinge pin and remove the rear arms. And we're going to put the RPM Bandit arms back in their place. These are a lot more narrow arm and they are RPM, so they should be super strong and also give us that narrower stance we're looking for. Then I just pull the camber link off the rear hub, separate that from the arm, and we're going to keep this hub, but we're going to replace the drive shafts because these CVDs are too long for our new narrow setup. So we got to pull all the parts off the rear hub so that we can put our MIP X-Duty CVD shafts in. To keep hardware together and keep it from disappearing off the table, I'm just going to go ahead and pop the rear hubs back on real quick. And also put one side of the rear camber links on. Again, these are shorter Bandit width camber links because our whole rear end is a lot more narrow than the Pro 2 rear end used to be. Last thing to do is to remove the out drives off of the differential because the MIP shafts need to go in their place. Building MIP shafts is really easy. Just make sure you coat all the parts in a nice coating of grease before assembling. Always use Loctite on the set screws inside the CV joints because you don't want them to come loose. Make sure that the flat spot on the through pin in the CVD is turned to the set screw side so that the set screw properly seats. Then we can put the 2 splined halves together and now they are ready to go in the car. You don't have to use MIP shafts for a car like this. You can use cut down Traxxas shafts. I wanted to use MIP products because they are some of the best products in the industry, and I know they are going to take a ton of abuse. So with those installed and the camber link hooked up, we can stick the wheel hex on and tighten the set screw down. Everything feels like it's nice and free. None of the hinge pins feel like they're binding up, so I think this is a job done. One of the last parts to do is put the rear body post mount on. Just screws on to where the stock SCB cage rear mount was. We'll slide these into the body mount with the brace on, install the grub screws and the little O-rings that hold the thumb washers steady. And again, I set these where I think they need to be. We might have to change them depending on where our car sits.
We're getting real close to being done with all the chassis work. We've got our arms swapped, our turnbuckles are swapped, the MIP X duties are assembled and on. We've got the extended body mounts on. We swapped the front shock tower. Now we have to get our shocks set up. I got Pro-Line Pro-Spec shocks. They're for the Pro-2 SC chassis. They are the same length shocks as stock, but they're a larger diameter. We're gonna put some limiters inside them to slam the ride height of this thing and probably put some bump stops on the outsides of the shaft. So like under heavy braking, we don't have front end dive and have the thing dig into the asphalt. So I'm gonna show you real quick how I'm gonna limit the shocks internally. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do for oil. We're gonna figure that out later, but I just wanna get this thing sitting on some tires so that we can see where the body needs to sit.
So these are some of our rear shocks. This is the stock length shock that came off the back of the chassis. This is the Pro-Spec shock that I already limited about 20 millimeters internally. So you can see there's a big difference in eye-to-eye length when they're fully extended. This is to get our ride height lower. I limited them with these rubber bushings that are basically the bump stops off of Axial SCX10 shocks. So I just kind of guessed and I threw 2 of them in there for now just to see where that gets our ride height, and if we have to adjust it from there, we will. So let's finish these up and throw them on the car real quick so we can see how it sits.
So we've got our shocks internally limited. I kind of guessed on where they need to be. We might have to change them, but we're gonna go ahead and throw them on the car just to see where everything sits. I can already tell that they are extremely stiff and they are a lot shorter. The ride height is definitely gonna be a lot lower than it was stock. So last thing to do is throw the wheels and tires on real quick so that we can put the body on and see how it sits.
Making pretty good progress turning this Pro-Line Pro-2 SCB into a Street Eliminator. We got everything narrowed down to Traxxas Bandit width or Buggy width. We got our MIP shafts in, we got the RPM arms on, we got our Pro-Line extended body mounts mounted up, and I cut the body out and dropped it on just to see where our ride height is. I think it's a little bit too tall. We're gonna have to do some suspension work and possibly limit our shocks down even further, as well as figure out a nice thick oil and a heavier spring rate, because I have a feeling for a fast drag car, you're gonna want stiff suspension. Next time we'll get our body painted up, we'll mount up our wheels and tires, we'll get the RS Pro Black Edition installed and soldered up, we'll dive into tuning some electronics. We've got a custom wheelie bar that is fresh off the printer that we're gonna install and see how that pans out, because I know we're gonna need one, and we're probably gonna have to get some sort of sway bars figured out for the front and the rear, maybe just the rear, we'll see. Hope everyone's enjoying the new build. I'm pretty excited about this car because it's completely out of my element and something I've never built before. And I'll be honest, drag racing, totally new thing to me. If you liked the video, click that like button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next episode. Subscribe if you haven't already, and share with your buddies so they can check out the build and have fun too. I'm Ty Campbell, we'll see you next time.